Okay, Q&A. David, go ahead.
Okay, so I know we oftentimes talk about perfection of midot being a very helpful, if not like a necessary vehicle for greater knowledge.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, how do we have figures like Achitophel, Doeg that we say are like greater than or like wiser, have more chachma than David HaMelech and
Yeah.
other people similar than that? If we say they have bad midot, at least one bad midot, multiple bad midot, how do those two work together?
Right. Right. So I think think how to put this here. So there definitely is a category that Yirmiyahu talks about, which I feel like should be talked about more. Let me see if I can find the pasuk. Chachamim. Okay, this is in. Oops, that is Zoom. Yeah, Yirmiyahu 4:22. Ki evil ami. Oh wait, let me just get this with the timing. Ki evil ami, for my people is foolish. Osi lo yada'u, they don't know me. Banim schalim hema, they are foolish children. Velo nevonim hema, they're not understanding. Chachamim hema lehara ulehetiv lo yada'u. They are wise men for evil. Okay. And they don't know how to do good. Okay, so I'm sure there's different interpretations of what that means and what it means that they're chachamim, but like plain shot sounds like you can be a chacham and you can be engaged in ra. It is interesting that he also characterizes them as schalim and not nevonim.
Yeah.
But like so on a very simple level, um, perfection of intellect is one thing, perfection of middos is another. And although we do hold that perfection of middos, or sorry, imperfection of middos can distort your thinking and can also distort your progress in chachma, it is clearly possible for someone to be a genius in certain areas of intellectual chachma, and it just makes no doesn't come through in their life. Rabbi Moskowitz would always give the example. Rabbi Moskowitz really liked biographies, and he would always talk about examples of these brilliant mathematicians or scientists whose personal lives were like a real like wreck, or philosophers also. And so like on a simple level, that is how you get people like that. I don't know the particulars of the like Achitophel. I've never looked into his character, but or Doeg, but like you can definitely have cases like that. That's like one approach. The other approach I would say is you got to remember. I give a son to share on this, but Chazal's tendency to use hyperbole when describing the chataim of great people. Like the biggest example is Shlomo Melech. It says in the Psukim, Shlomo Melech built altars and temples to the Ovdei Avodah Zarah, to the Elilim, to the false gods, and he didn't. But because he didn't rebuke his wives for doing that, then it's ascribed to him as though he's the one who was the direct cause of it. So I don't know which examples are like that. Like clearly, like Doeg did say Rechilus, and like that led to this horrible thing. But that would be another one. And then the third point I was going to make is I was actually just making this point this morning. Where is it? Hold on, I got to check my Facebook. I'm going to check it here. So the Nevi'im are always saying stuff about how we don't have knowledge of God, like in this pasuk here. But the pasuk that doesn't get enough press is 22:16. 22:16, which is Dan din aniv evion az tov. He took up the case of the poor and the destitute, then it is good. Hello, he hadas osinu Hashem. Is that not the one who knows me? Says Hashem. So Yedias Hashem is measured by the extent to which it actually expresses itself in action. That's the Yirmiyahu 9, 23, which is my favorite pasuk. Only in this may one glorify himself, comprehending and knowing me, because I am Hashem who does kindness, justice, and righteousness in the land. Because in these is my desire, and as Rambam says, like it's knowledge of God that culminates in chesed, tzedakah, and mishpat. So that's another thing that you can have. I mean, this is related to my first point, but you can have someone who has the type of chachma that plain pshat Yirmiyahu saying you should not take glory in. So that would be the purely intellectual knowledge. I know Rambam doesn't take it that way, but that would be the purely intellectual knowledge as opposed to the knowledge of Hashem that leads to action. So there's some compartmentalization or split going on there.
Okay, so then with that, if I could maybe say my question in a little more particular way in that context, because the way that I feel like I've heard it be discussed is that, or described, is that a lack of perfection of midot means that will distort your knowledge and your chachma in some way. So I can see definitely how it would distort your action.
Yeah.
But I've also feel like I've heard of it in the even just purely intellectually, your knowledge will be distorted because it will be like conforming to ways that you want,
correct,
things like that. So
right?
How is that possible?
Yeah, no. So that will happen with these chachamim, but it might not happen in the area of chachma that they have. So for example, you can be a jerk, but you could really know all the svaras in Nezikin. Because if you're approaching it in a in a purely intellectual way and not actually meaning like that guy who's a chacham lahara in Nezikin can come up with really good chidushim, but when he's actually in a scenario of Nezikin bein adam l'chavero, that's when his knowledge is going to get distorted. It's not going to interfere necessarily with his analysis because it could, but it doesn't have to because people are really good at compartmentalizing.
So you would say that even in the areas that he has imperfections in, he could still be a great chacham in those areas. It's not only he's horrible in one area and a chacham in the other area. Yeah, you're saying even one they could. Even
in the same area. Now, again, I am also acknowledging that it could affect him in that area in ways that he doesn't know. Like I think, especially when it comes to knowledge of God, then I don't think you can have. Maybe you can have purely abstract knowledge of God that is not affected by emotions. I just don't think it's a winning gamble. There's more I learned to him. It seems like your emotional perfection is going to affect even your intellectual knowledge.
Okay.
Kal v'chomer, whether your knowledge is real to you.
Okay. Yeah. And that being for some reason a different category than like ben adam l'chavero things.
Not a different category. I'm saying that can happen also. You can have really good knowledge of the philosophy of ethics and not be an ethical person, and you can analyze it very clearly, but it's not reaching into your action, or it could affect your actual analysis. Yeah. Like I doubt that. I've never I don't know. Like if you look at philosophies that are known for leading to evil, like let's say like Nietzsche, certain nihilistic philosophies, it's very hard to say, even if the theories are very intellectual, it's very hard to say that the theories themselves weren't affected by the person's emotions. I would assume that there's a pagam in the emotions there. Yeah. Okay. Isaac, you have an off the record question, so I'm going to just pause this and leave it to everyone to remind me to unpause it when I'm supposed. Okay, so the question is that lately there's been, a increase. I don't know if statistically this is true, and I'm not going to check Wikipedia for it, of people editing Wikipedia articles to insert either actual facts about people who oppose Israel for the ongoing war with Gaza or whatever, or maliciously lie or whatever, those kinds of things, right? So the question is, what does the Torah say about something like that? So the interesting thing that comes to my mind is in this always happens when I'm in Hebrew and I type al haTorah, it goes al is shach, so I always get an article about the shach, which is funny. If there's an algorithm that is affected by it, then it thinks I'm really into the shach. Okay, hold on a second. So what comes to my mind is Avos 1:6 or 1:5, or am I totally off? No,
just to clarify.
Yeah.
My question is specifically about resorting to the same tactics in order to combat what they're doing.
To combat what they're doing. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So first, let me address what they're doing. Okay. So so the Mishnah in 1:6 in Avos says at the end, "Ve'vidan es kol adam l'kav zechus," right? So this is a whole sugya, but I think the Rambam is the person who says this. He says, Inyano, the idea is, Sh'im yihi adam she'eno yadu Allah. If there's a person who is not known to you, lo teda ha'im tzadiku o rasha. You don't know whether he's righteous or wicked. But tir'ehu ose mase o omer davar sh'im yeforash be'ofen ma harehu tov. So you see him do an action. So unknown guy, you see him do an action or say something that if you explain it in one way, it's good, and if you explain it in another way, it's bad. Harshehu katov, then you should explain it as good. The al takshov bo ra, and don't think evil of him. Okay, so that's where the whole sugya is. Like, why should you do that? Okay, but then he says about im ki haya ish yaduash hu tzadik. If you know that he's a guy who is righteous, mufursam b'maseh tov, and he's well known for his good actions. V'nir lo ma'aseh shekol tchunosav yoru al hayoso ma'aseh ra. And if he does an action that all of its qualities indicate that it's bad, and the only way you can interpret it as good, you can decide that it's good is with a stretch, with like an extreme stretch and like very, very improbable, positing improbable things. You need to explain it for good. Since it's possible that it's good. And it is not permissible to suspect him. And this is what they Chazal mean when they say anyone who suspects those who are kosher get bodily lashes. I don't know practically what we mean by that. And here's the one I wanted to get to. If someone is a Rasha and his deeds are well known, and then you see him do an action that all indications are that it's good, but there's a remote possibility, it's only a remote possibility that it was for evil. You need to guard against him, and not to believe that he is good, or that there's good in him. Because there's a possibility for evil. Amar, it says in Mishleic, ki chanin kolo al tamin bo, ki sheva toavos belibo. Even if he's gracious in his voice, don't believe him because there are 7 abominations in his heart. V'im hayabilti yadu, but if he's not known, v'hamaise note el echad mishnei ktsavos, but the action inclined towards one of the two sides, meaning I think equally to both sides. Then as a virtuous derech, you need shiadun lakavskos. You need to judge him favorably. Whatever the two sides it is. So I'm not equating this with what Isaac's asking about here, but you see from here that there's 2 ways to learn this whole sugya, right? One is, when we make these dons, like these dinim, I don't know how to say it. When you don someone lakavskos or lakavchova, are we doing that because we are trying to find the truth? Meaning that if a tzaddik does something that looks bad, since the probability that it actually is bad is really like very low, then we assume that it's really good. Or are we trying to just get ourselves in the habit of framing the tzaddik's actions as good and the Rasha's actions as bad, and then the Benoni by derech Chasidus to like view people as good, and like there's benefits of viewing it that way, regardless of whether it's actually true. Those are like the 2 ways to learn this whole sugya. But the reason why this comes to mind is that, based on what I said to David's question about the derech of Chazal is to amplify the righteousness of tzaddikim and the wickedness of, I was actually making a different point, but from the same shir, to amplify the righteousness of tzaddikim and to amplify the wickedness of the evil, and to like Chazal go out of the way and ascribe evil, like extreme evil, to people who didn't actually do it or who they don't know did it. So it does seem like there is an argument for doing something like that, certainly in your own mind. But like, I guess the question here is like, this is going to express itself in how you treat these people or how you talk about them. Like if someone, let's say some Nazi does something that looks good, I can't imagine the Rama means that like, in your own mind, you should view it as evil, but when you talk about him, you should praise it. Like that doesn't make any sense to me. In other words, like presumably you're talking about this guy, you're for all intents and purposes, you're treating as though this guy is actually doing evil, So what these people are doing who are editing Wikipedia, again, maliciously or out of ignorance, they think that what Israel is doing is evil, and so they're finding every way to publicize Israel's evil in order to combat it, and in certain cases, like they actually, like, again, they're mistaken, but like what they're doing is good in the same way that we would publicize what people are doing for, who are evil, and like trying to bring up public awareness that what they're doing is evil. So to me, it does seem like it would be a good idea to engage in tactics like that for the sake of like vilifying true evil, both for your own middos to like get you to Zechir's Amalek, not that Hamas is Amalek, but like in the same philosophy of like vilifying people who are evil in order to like keep evil on your radar and to like break identification with them. I think that's good for you. And I think it's good for the world in terms of like raising awareness of this stuff. At the same time, like you do have to follow Mishleic, and like anytime you distort the truth in any way, even if it's just an exaggeration, like you're running the risk of undermining your own credibility. You are prompting your enemies to engage in one-upping you, and that could lead to something bad. So like these things all have to be weighed. So I'm not saying like black or white issue, you should or shouldn't do this. I'm saying like there is a grounds for taking a stance like that. And if you're going to do it, you have to like weigh the ends and the means with Chachma. Yeah, Moshe?
When you say what they're doing is good, do you mean that they think what they're doing is good, or do you mean?
I'm saying the category of thing that they're doing is good, even if they're mistaken about the particular. And again, in certain cases, the category is not good. If they're doing it maliciously, but like I'm saying, like I'm talking about the people who genuinely, think that Israel's doing evil. I would say, like in the same way that I would say, I remember, I guess I won't say his name because I don't know if he wants it public, but like someone who I went to yeshiva with said that his high school rebbe who came from yeshiva said to him, like this high schooler at the time said like, he heard that his rebbe was like into like independent thinking, and he tried to like get him with a gotcha, which is like, so are you telling me that if I investigate like, philosophy and religion and I conclude rationally that Christianity is correct, then I should follow that? And he expected his rebbe to say no. And he's like, 100%, so like, obviously we're not endorsing Christianity, but we are endorsing following your mind. So if a person genuinely like was convinced that what Israel was doing was bad, then of course they should do everything in their power to vilify it and to promote the other cause.
I mean, can you say that there's no such thing as the categorical good because it must be viewed in the context? And you wouldn't say what Hamas is doing is good because they think that they should eradicate evil in the world, so it's good to be killing women and children and civilian or whatever.
I don't follow the question. In other words, I think that a person should follow their mind.
Right, but if they're mistaken and then following their mind means doing evil, then why would that be called good? Wouldn't that you say they're mistaken?
Yeah.
And in theory, in the right area would be considered good, but because it's in this context, it's bad.
Right. What I'm saying though is I'm saying like you have to engage in bechira. So like I'm pro bechira. I mean, right? I mean, like if someone whose initials are JD, not Vance, thinks that Israel is evil and he wants to protest it, like I think he should. I'm not going to like say, well, I think you should only do what your mind says if it agrees with me. Like that's just like a really childish position,
No, I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
I was only asking in terms of labeling the good.
I think I'm not labeling the particular good. I'm labeling the bechira, the conduct that the person is engaging in is good. You should follow your mind. Following your mind is a good thing. Can you follow your mind to do stupid and evil stuff? Yes, but I'm not going to call following the mind bad.
Right.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense to me. I'm just taking notes because I always forget what I quote here. And this is Yirmiyahu and then Avos 1:6. Okay, yeah. All right, next question. Yeah, Moshe.
What do you think of Rabbi Zimmer's world of Midrash approach?
What do I think of Rabbi Zimmer's world of Midrash? Okay, so let me first of all summarize my understanding of what it is, and then someone correct me if I'm off, which is that a lot of the problems that people have with Midrash is that we know that you're not supposed to take Midrash literally. So whenever anyone interprets a Midrash in a way that seems literal, people say like, that's not right, or like, that's irrational, and that kind of thing. But what Rabbi Zimmer's world of Midrash approach is saying like, no, it's not that you're believing this to be the case historically. Midrash is basically like I had a good term for this at once. It's like a, okay, this is not the way to say it. It's like a, I mean, it's almost like an didactic fiction, meaning that like in the same way as you can have a fiction author who writes a novel in a fantasy world and learn true ideas from it, the Midrash is doing that, but it's like, based on a true story, So for example, if you have someone who says that, I was just discussing with someone about Yitzchak at the Akedah, right? So let's say like, or Rivka getting married when she was 3 or whatever, but let's say Yitzchak at the Akedah, either he was, what do they say, 37? Is that what Rashi Shita is? 37, or let's say like Ibn Ezra says like, no, that's like, he must have been a teenager, So if you go back historically, there's only one reality, okay? So does that mean that any Midrash that is based on the non-factually true thing is like valueless? No, you can expound on it and you can build up a whole world and analyze it in a like consistent fashion, and like get ideas out of it. So like that's like the general approach of World of Midrash is not taking Midrashim literally in the sense that you believe these things to be historically true, but taking them as facts that you're working with in order to like, get ideas from, regardless of whether you hold that they're factually true. Is that like an accurate?
So
Yeah, okay, fine. So I did find, I wish I had this here. I wouldn't know how to find it really fast. The Maharsha in his Chidushe Agados, I believe says outright, I've suspected this for many years, but I got a new edition of Ein Yaakov and I was reading the Maharsha's introduction again. And I believe he says outright that that's what he's doing. He's fleshing out, everyone holds that there's the external meaning and the internal meaning of the Midrash. And in some cases, they're both literal. And in some cases, the external meaning is allegorical. And, but what he's doing is he's not necessarily going to divulge what the internal meaning is, but he's going to expand and be mafarish the external meaning and flesh it out, in full. And like, let's say, for example, was it Abai who fought the dragon in the base Midrash? No? Who was it?
I think that's on Masna maybe?
Yeah, okay. So whoever it was, so like you might find a Maharsha who like, I'm just making this up, who explains like what the dragon's heads look like and how like what its physical features are. Now, does that mean that he takes it literally? No, he's fleshing it out so that as a mushal, you can get access to like what the thing is, So that part I agree with. Okay, part I question. Oh, and then the second aspect of World of Midrash is that Rabbi Zimmer holds that all Rashis, from what I understand, all Rashis are unified. Okay, and that like Rashi is trying to put, there's hundreds of midrashim, right? Thousands of midrashim, millions of midrashim, but like, but midrashim have different authors, so you can't necessarily assume that they're meant to be taken as consistent with each other. But Rabbi Zimmer holds that Rashi is putting together a consistent shita. Now he learns Rashi way, way, way more than I do. So like I would rely that his intuition has basis, but I am not convinced of that because I have not learned Rashi in that way. Like I have no idea whether Rashi might quote, two midrashim that don't necessarily have to be, what do you call it? Reconciled, So like in that sense of like building a like fully alternate reality world of Midrash, like Rashi's world of Midrash as one consistent view, like of a particular world. Like, I agree with the derech of approaching Midrash. Whether you can construct a unified world of Midrash based on Rashi, that I don't know. So that's another pillar of the world of Midrash that I think. But yeah, but I think it's a good approach. And then I think, though, that a third aspect of the world of Midrash, which I don't know enough of his Shita to know how much he does this, I really got this from Rabbi Sachs, is part of Midrash is that it's speaking to the snake. It's it's speaking to the Yetzer Hara, to the imagination. So what you should do is like allow for the emotional resonance, and there are people who like write about Midrash like this. Like my friend and fellow educator Olivia Friedman is very, very into fiction and fantasy, and the way she takes Midrash is that it is speaking to that part of you, the same part of you that really, gets into stories like the imaginative realm. That's what Midrash is speaking to. I think we, not Rabbi Zimmer, but we in yeshiva typically don't interpret Midrash that way. I think we like take it in a more dry intellectual way. I don't think that's right. I do think it is speaking to the emotions and to the imagination, but I think that there are people who take it that way and don't try to like find out the ideas, like they go too far in that direction. But I do think that Midrash, you do have to like allow it to resonate. Like, let's say, for example, like what would be a good example of this? I don't know, like there are Midrashim that I don't have any on hand. I don't know, Midrashim that really like oh yeah, here's an example from I was saying before. It says that Bilam had committed bestiality with his donkey, right? So intellectually, I think that there's two approaches to take to that. Either there's a particular idea there about Bilam or about bestiality, or it's like what I was saying to David in my shir about vilifying Rishaim, that they're ascribing all these like wicked things to him. Okay, but my view is if you learn that midrash, Chazal do want us to feel disgusted about Bilam as though he's someone who committed bestiality with his donkey. And in certain cases, I don't know about this case, but in certain cases, that feeling is where the insight's going to come from. Like in the same way as when we learn Tehillim, we have to not just look at the words, we have to like let the emotional resonance wash over us. And then from that headspace, find the idea. Or in Kinos, that's another part of my derech of learning Kinos, or in Slichos, or in Tefillah, you have to like let the emotions, you have to get on the emotional wavelength of the text, and then let the Chiddush come from there, as opposed to, let's say, when you learn in Gemara, you don't do that. I do think in World of Midrash, with certain Midrashim, then you should do that. And I think that's, if I'm not mistaken, I think that's part of his World of Midrash approach. So, yeah. Yeah, Doctor? Sure. Hold on just 1 second. Was this a follow-up though on this, or?
No.
Okay, fine. All right, so let me pause this. Okay, the off-the-record question that was just asked had to do with like the reliability of the Zohar per se and for halacha. Is that a fair summary? Yeah. So I got to find this, but I gave when I was doing a Drive to Work podcast, which was modeled after the head designer of Magic the Gathering's Drive to Work podcast. He would turn on his recorder when he went into the car and then just talk about a topic and then turn it off when he got there. And so I do have an episode of this Drive to Work podcast that's not on any of my podcasts right now, which I can send you, called 6 Questions or 6 Reasons Why Kabbalah is Sketchy, or 6 Questions You Should Ask Yourself About Kabbalah. So if anything, or before you learn Kabbalah, I think. So when you find something like, let's say like the Zohar, right? So the questions you have to ask are, what is Kabbalah? Okay, what do we mean by that? The term is obviously something that is, a new term. Like Chazal didn't call it Kabbalah. Kabbalah in Chazal is Torah Kabbalah Path, or whatever, different Kabbalah, right? So you have, for example, Rambam, who explains that Masa Bereshis and Masa Merkava are physics and metaphysics, and then you have people on the other side who hold that Kabbalah is like, some sort of like mysticism, and you have people who hold by practical Kabbalah, who hold that some sort of magic, and people who hold by Kabbalah who hold that it's like some sort of meditation, so like, what do you mean by Kabbalah? Like, that's the first thing. Okay. Second question is this Kabbalah? Okay. So you can have a shita about what is Kabbalah, but then is this particular work that you're describing Kabbalah? So let's say, for example, the Sefer Yetzirah, right? Is something that Saadia Gaon seems to treat as an astronomical treatise, I think, and others say it's a way to make a golem, like it's a way to like manipulate the forces of physics. Other people hold that it's about the sphere, So you have complete disagreements about the nature of a certain text, or let's say a given midrash, right? So you have midrashim where one mafarish will say that this is a sod, and the other Mefarish will say, no, that this is something that is Dvarim Pshutim, So is this particular thing Kabbalah, Third question is, I think I had a question here about authenticity or authorship of who wrote this. And that's where, depending on how reliable or authentic it is, would determine how much you like lean into it. So for example, if I know that the Rambam wrote something, I'm going to put a lot of thought into trying to figure it out and taking it seriously and making a bunch of assumptions about it, both like in terms of how much I try to resolve problems and contradictions, and also like how much I take seriously the text. Whereas if someone says, oh, by the way, that's not the Rambam, that was a forgery, so I'm not going to like, yeah. Now, it doesn't mean you can't learn ideas from a forgery. Like you can still get ideas from it, but it is going to affect how you engage with the text, And if the text is making claims where the only basis for relying on it is the author's qualifications, so then it really does matter, So let's say, for example, you find a claim in something like the Zohar that is not made anywhere in Chazal, and the only source is the Zohar. So am I really going to take that in the same way that I would take Torah Baal Peh, or am I going to be suspect of it? So like that's the third question. Fourth question is, am I intellectually ready to learn it? Because that's a thing with, broadly speaking, with Kabbalah, that like not everyone's on the level to learn it without misunderstanding it, and then the related question is am I psychologically ready for it? A sod is an idea that is either, my understanding of a sod is an idea that's either too intellectually deep or complex or difficult to understand that people can misunderstand it. So let's say, for example, the Sod HaIbor, in the sense of the complex calculations and astronomy needed to interpolate the for leap years, that's intellectually very complex. That's why it's a Sod. Then you have other kinds of Sodos that let's say Sodos about God, that if you're not psychologically ready and you haven't done the perfection of middos, then you could distort your understanding for emotional reasons. So those are two reasons why people can have the the Pardes effect with Kabbalah of either Ben Azai died, then Zoma went crazy, Acher became an Apikoros, and only Rabbi Akiva went in and went out in peace. So those three like undesirable results can happen either for intellectual or psychological reasons. And then I forgot what my sixth question is. Oh, my sixth question is should you be learning it? I mean, just because you are intellectually capable or and psychologically capable, is that something that you should be doing right now? So let's just say, for example, like there's a hierarchy, like you should in what do you call it, in the early days of Hasidus, then one of the criticisms of them is that they would only study Kabbalistic stuff and neglect the study of Shas. So like, is this really what you should be doing with your time? I think that was my sixth question. So those are the questions. So that's like the gauntlet that if someone says, oh, learn the Zohar, those are the six questions I think you have to ask. Okay. So there's that. And then the last question about, or the other part of your question about halachically like relying on it, that has to do with like a philosophy of jurisprudence. It's a meta halakhic question about to what extent should the the Zohar specifically, or like Kabbalistic things in general influence halacha. So you have like the hardcore shitos, one way that it's better than halacha, or like it should override it. Then you have the other shitos where like, no, it should never interfere with halacha. And then you have the people in the middle where it's like, if there's a machlokas between Bavli and Zohar, then you obviously go Bavli, but like if you can incorporate a Kabbalistic thing that doesn't interfere with halacha, then you should do that, So that's my broad overview. What I hold and why I hold it would be a much longer thing, but that's how to think about it. Yeah, in my opinion. Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot to say.
On the record response.
Yeah. But also like I would want to do justice. Like there's a whole yeah. And I've been meaning for a long time to either give sheer or write up my view on the Zohar specifically, but like it's such a long endeavor to like really get together everything in a good way. But I've got books if you want to borrow them. Yeah.
You did give sheer once.
Oh, apparently
I saw the source packet from it.
Do you know what it was called?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I can find the packet. It's still in my locker.
Oh, cool. Okay, yeah. If you remind me, maybe I'll check it out and send it. Yeah. Okay. Next question. Yeah, Moshe.
So I've heard it said that people can only do what they believe is good, but is it possible for someone to understand with their mind that it would be good to do a certain thing, but still feel that they should not do it?
You're saying within that assumption that people only do what they feels good? Yeah.
I'm misunderstanding what that statement means.
Right. Can a person just say it one more time, just say the case?
Can a person understand with their mind, or claim they understand with their mind, that X action is
Smoking is harmful.
right.
Right.
And then still feel they really want to do it.
Yes, I would say yes.
So then what does that statement mean?
Yeah, right. That's a good question. So maybe the philosophers who hold that way would laugh at me when I say this, but like just on a very starting level, right? I think we all agree that a person can be in conflict. Like experientially, we experience this, right? So it's not a question of can this happen? It's a question of how do we interpret this, And that we'd say that there's a difference between a person there's three people, right? There's the person who knows smoking is harmful and is repulsed by it, so his emotions are on board. And then there's a person who thinks smoking is, mistakenly thinks smoking is beneficial and his emotions go with that. And then there's the case in the middle that you're describing, right? So how do we view that? In that framework. I mean, the framework I've worked with for a long time, and I don't know which side this falls on, and this is definitely from Rabbi Moskowitz, but like there's a difference between having knowledge and the knowledge being real to you, And by being real to you, we mean that your emotions are in line with your knowledge, right? So is that so I do think so. I think that's on the other side though, right? Because I would be saying that like you can, well, I guess it depends on how you define knowledge, right? Because you'd say that if a person is smoking and says, yeah, I know that it's harmful for me, then like I would say you have the knowledge intellectually, but it's not real to you. So do you call that as having the knowledge or not? I don't really know. Yeah. But it's a good question. Like, for example, like the most readily available source that I have in the Rishonim for this idea, and I'm not saying this is the only one, but this is I think the first time I saw this, is Rabbeinu Yonah in Mishleic 122, who goes through the three parts of the soul, the nefesh, which he holds as like the instinctual, physiological drives, and then the ruach, which is what we would call like the psychological or like egoistic, drives, like desire for like revenge and honor and accomplishment, and then the rational faculty. And then he says, so he talks about these people who their taiva blinds their eyes, but so the taiva draws them towards it and then blinds their eyes. He's talking about Pesi, about a naive simpleton in Mishlei. If they were to if not for the fact that their taiva ruled over them and they were not like seduced into being drawn after it, then it wouldn't mess up their minds. That's why Chazal say anyone who allows himself to be seduced by his own yetzer falls into Gehenna. Okay, they apply this pasuk from Bereshis, from Cain, that towards you is its desire, but you may conquer it. The inclination of man's heart is evil, and it demands things of him. And it yearns for him to give it whatever it desires. Here's the line: the yetzer does not have the ability to satisfy its desire without the consent of the rational soul and its thoughts. This is what it means you should rule over it. And that's why the nefesh, meaning the rational soul, is punished when it gives into to the will of the taiva. So he seems to be saying almost like the mind is like the gatekeeper of the yetzer, that the only way you can bring yourself to act on your taiva is through employing and rationalizing it with your mind. I don't know if this is helping at all, but I'm just like toying around with different ways of framing this.
Right.
Yeah.
Anything that you're going to do at the end of the day, it means that you have decided in some way you should do it.
Right. And it is a corruption of the mind because you are using your mind to do it, unless it is something that like there is this category, like, I don't know in terms of the how far you can take this in terms of the realm of like acting on taiva, but let's say like if you touch a hot stove, your hand recoils back. That's not an act of the mind. That's an act of the body, So possibly there are taiva scenarios where let's say maybe an example is if a person is starving to death and then encounters food and they just like gobble it up, like I don't know how much the mind is involved in that. That might just be like instincts kicking in. But generally speaking, like you do need to employ your mind, and therefore your mind is culpable in this way. But I don't know how that. I feel like both sides of that machlokas can like explain that. That's what's true about that machlokas because everyone agrees to the phenomena.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, Isaac.
I have a different question.
Okay, we have 1 more minute. I actually have to go soon. So if it's a quick question, then you can ask it. But if not, we should save it.
Okay, I'll ask it and you can decide.
Okay.
What's the Torah's take on like how you I think how you should feel when you're seeing someone else get Mishleic consequences, not necessarily because they did a let's say like a Russia thing, but because let's say they didn't think through something or something like that.
Right. It's a good question. Right. I mean, on the one hand, you have the do you know where it is? Sorry, do you know what I'm referring to, Isaac? Yeah. Okay, yeah. Oh, I didn't spell it right. But let's see if it's still.
There's also a pasuk, where is it when the Russia dies in the city?
Right. Yeah. That's what I was going to quote the two. Right. So, anytime anyone in Hamas or Hezbollah gets blown up, then you'll have people online who quote the Avod Rishayim Rina. Right? Is that the? Let me get the actual pasuk here. Oops. That's sorry. Anyway. All right. That's when we do MG. Ba'avod, I think it's Ba'avod Rishayim Rina. Ba'avod Rishayim. Let's see if that does it. Okay, so you have 2 psukim in Mishlei. Waiting. You have 11:10. The 2 tzaddikim talot kirya uva'avod Rishayim Rina. When the tzaddikim are benefited, then the city exults, and with the destruction of the Rishayim, there is joyous song. And then you've got the other pasuk in Mishlei, 24, 17, and 18. Binafol oyivcha al tismach uvikashlo al yugali becha. And when he stumbles, when your enemy falls, do not rejoice. And when he stumbles, don't let your heart be glad. Pen yira Hashem v'raba einav v'heshiv me'alav apo. Lest Hashem see and it be evil in his eyes, and he turns from upon him his wrath. Implications towards you, right? So you'll see people quote these 2 psukim, in favor of celebrating when Sinwar is killed, and people who are like, quoting the other one. So plain shot, and I'm using this to answer your question, is rejoicing when Rishayim die. Rishayim dying is an objective good. Okay, so if you rejoice, then that shows your emotions are in line with reality. Or if you make yourself rejoice, that helps your emotions be in line with reality in the way that we're saying here, that it's good to train yourself and to promote rejoicing for the destruction of objective Rishayim. In contrast, this pasuk in Mishlei here, I think everyone says, Oyivcha is your personal enemy, which is not based in reality. That's based on just like ego or like disliking this person, okay? So that is definitely an imperfection, and that's bad, okay? And I've given shiurim on both those pasukim, so you could like listen to that if you want to. So the thing is that I think you can also have people who are rejoicing for lo lishma reasons when objective Rishayim die. And you can also have people who your personal enemy is an objective Russia, So like you can have the opposite cases as well. And certainly if your enemy is an objective Russia, and they fall, there are cases where if you can rejoice in a way that's not indulging those egotistic relative value system emotions, then that would be beneficial. But if you're indulging in this like subjective world, that might not be good. And then likewise, I think you can debate, is it good for people to rejoice for lo lishma reasons when real Rishayim die? I personally think it's good, but I do think that there's a limit. I think that there are people who like go overboard, and it is an imperfection, So regarding what Isaac said about when you see someone get Mishleic consequences, I think emotionally you need to know where you're at, and you need to form a stance on these 2 issues about like, to what extent is it good to indulge in those personal subjective feelings? Like what's the cost of that, and what's the benefit of like allowing Mishlei to become real to you by like, promoting good Mishleic decision making by like relishing like like they got what was coming to them, like is that going to help you then see it for yourself? Like I know Rabbi Moskowitz always would advocate that approach. He's saying like when you first start learning Mishleic, don't apply it to yourself, apply it to other people. And what'll happen is if you keep practicing that, you get better and better intellectually at analyzing them. And then as you become more perfected Mishleically, you'll start to like look at yourself that way, and that would be good. So he held that was a road to like Mishleic perfection. Okay. I'm sure there's more to say, but I got to go. All right. Good questions. Thanks for,
Thank you.
Thank you.